Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Troy Moling and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. So glad you're able to spend a little bit of your day with us. This week we're bringing you new research into cattle temperament, a look at the annual rural poll, Al's forecast, and much more. But we're beginning today's show with what's making news in the markets. The November WASDE report reduced expected yields for both corn and soybeans. Corn was dropped by 215 million bushels, and the production estimate for soybeans was lowered by 98 million bushels. Iowa State University ag economist Chad Hart joined me this week for a deeper dive into the report and where the markets may go from here. First, though, I got an update on harvest and crop conditions in Iowa after what has proven to be a challenging year with the weather.
The end result is actually the crops came out quicker than usual, but that was because you can think of the combination of the derecho forced us to look at those crops earlier. The drought here forced those crops to mature earlier, and so we got an early jump start, and basically that's held completely through now. So as we look at corn and soybean harvest here in the state of Iowa, we are basically done. I think it's 94% on the corn side, 98% on the soybean side. So from that perspective, it was early. The issue with early, though, is that, farmers continue to report that this crop actually was drier than they expected. And so we've had some problems, for example, with bean shatter because it got that dry out there in the field. So even though we were moving through more quickly, you faced still the dryness in that crop, not only creating problems in harvesting it, but also leading to problems as far as fewer bushels out there, just not having the moisture content that a normal crop would.
And I'd also like to get your thoughts on the November WASDE from this week. So given the recent strength of export sales for corn and soybeans, lower estimates of ending stocks for both were anticipated. So explain to us what we saw.
We definitely did see those lower ending stocks, and it came in a variety of ways. For example, when you look at soybeans, where USDA had already posted sort of a strong export number, the only adjustment we actually saw from the November WASDE report was on the yield side, but that was enough to pull production down 100 million bushels and to put that ending stock level at 190 million as we look out there to the next August. So you're talking about a stocks to use ratio that's now being projected at less than 5%. Really tightening up those numbers as we're looking at the soybean market. For corn, it was the combination of we saw that lower production number coming in on top of a really strong export number. In fact, USDA moving to a record projection in terms of corn exports out there. The combination of the supply downgrade and the boost in exports lowered those ending stocks by roughly 500 million bushels. And so you're talking about ending stock levels of 1.7 billion as we look out there to the next August, the lowest we've been since, I believe, 2013, 2014.
Do you expect any major changes with these USDA numbers when they're finalized in January?
I think we'll maybe see some smaller adjustments out there, but I think they've really put in the big adjustments now. And like I say, with states like Iowa running ahead in terms of those harvest percentages here, this makes these November numbers fairly solid as we look forward to January.
For this next question, not asking you to get political here, but wanted to get in a word about the recent presidential election. Any guesses as to how agriculture is going to look under a Biden presidency? And this could be related to markets, ag regulations, trade, any of that.
Well, I think when we look here, with a possible Biden presidency here, we can just fall back to sort of where we were at 4 years ago and look at the lay of the land in agriculture back then. I think we could expect to see a President Biden look to be more I guess I'll call it multinational when it comes to like trade agreements, for example. So looking to rejoin, for example, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or looking to build more multinational trade negotiations and agreements there. We could also definitely expect to see more regulation, especially when it comes to the environmental side of the marketplace. And, you know, in this case, I'll say for the biofuels, I would expect, let's call it more consistency when it comes back to, for example, the small refinery waivers. When you think about that issue within biofuels, that was really something that cropped up here during the Trump administration that wasn't a problem back under the Obama/Biden administration. And so I think we'll see a return back towards that more, let's call it stable biofuels policy.
And Chad, we'll end it today with any marketing or risk management advice that you'd like to leave us with as we move through November.
Yep. And so, you know, 2020 has been that sort of upside down year where we've seen, you know, our price movements have basically been the opposite of what seasonal pricing patterns normally are. You know, the spring highs became the spring lows this year. And here where we're sitting normally at the harvest lows, we're actually seeing the harvest highs. But what this gives crop farmers especially an opportunity to do here is lock in some price protection at a time when they're not used to seeing it out there. And in fact, with the strength that we've seen in the marketplace over the past couple of months, where we do have corn prices on the board over $4 a bushel, where we do have bean prices that are over $11 a bushel on the board, it definitely lends itself an opportunity for folks to at least put in some price floors, whether they're going to do this through, you know, hedging or using options out there. And especially if they're thinking about storing this crop into the springtime. Right now, you know, we're seeing that growth. Exports are really driving it. But I would say there's a lot of uncertainty coming along with that as well. So anytime that I can lock in a price floor at a really good price and hope for continued price improvement, it's always good to have that, let's call it insurance or security blanket that can be provided at a time when you're not normally thinking of putting in those price floors. You know, harvest time is usually where we know, okay, we're at the low point. Here we're not. We're at some of the best prices, if not the best prices we've seen all year.
Next week, we'll be joined by Daryl Peel from Oklahoma State University. If you have a question you'd like for me to ask him, email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll pass your question along. Next up, a chute score is a common 6-point scoring system often used to evaluate cattle temperament and their response to potentially fearful situations like human handling. Stress brought on by such events can have a wide range of impacts on the production and profitability of cattle. Recently, a team from UNL conducted a study to determine how training can help people more accurately assess temperament using the chute score. Market Journal's Bill Dodd has more.
One main goal of any given cow-calf operation is to ensure one new cow-calf pair annually. This means productive performance is a key element of profitability. Studies have shown that high-stress temperament in cattle may cause disruptions in normal physiological processes of fertility. Likewise, calving rates may be negatively associated with aggressive temperament. While safety is a good reason to implement chute scoring, being able to do so efficiently and effectively could have a positive impact on production as well as profitability.
The reason that most people want to quantify docility in beef cattle is mainly for safety purposes, especially people who raise cattle and work cattle in a family situation where you may have children, be it during calving or working of calves. Docility is really important from a safety standpoint, not only of the humans, but of the cattle themselves. They don't get a leg caught in the chute, or they don't jump through gates and stuff like that. But what people may or may not know is that the stress level of an animal also has an impact on some other economically relevant traits like meat quality. Dark cutters are known to be a result of cattle in stressful situations, and fertility. So cattle who are more easily stressed out it's harder for them to conceive. So, the benefits to me is that it's fast. You can do it during normal handling procedures whether you're just putting on pour-on or you're vaccinating your calves, whatever it may be. It's done kind of what we call at the speed of commerce. There's no drawing of blood. There's no taking a fecal sample or anything extra. But you do have to have a relevant understanding of the ethogram and knowledge in a way that's consistent across, multiple times of scoring cattle.
Knowing that a solid understanding of chute scoring is important to getting the most accurate score, in order to lend assistance to the beef industry, UNL grad students conducted a study to determine if training could improve a person's ability to accurately assess temperament via a chute scoring system. Through the use of pre-recorded training videos, the study showed scoring accuracy increased by more than 10% regardless of age or prior experience of working with cattle.
And so what we did is we had 90 individuals throughout our study. They just responded to emails, flyers, things like that we kind of got the word out that we needed people to participate. They ranged in ages from college age to the 60s, obviously a mixture of sexes, but we wanted to get a representative, not only of people who had cattle handling experience, but maybe those who didn't, to see how they responded to training. And so those 90 individuals just showed up on a day, and we had pre-selected videos for them to watch and then assign a chute score on a scale of 1 to 6. And at that time, this was could have been potentially their first time seeing a chute score ethogram, or really maybe even the first time seeing a beef cow handled in general. And so the video was of the animal restrained in the head gate with the sidebars left open for 15 seconds. They then assessed the chute score on a scale of 1 to 6. Following that first round, we randomized our participants based on their cattle handling experience, their sex, and their age. So we came up with representative groups, 3 representative groups. One was a control who got no training between the first and second times watching the video. One treatment group who were only able to see a training video that we had pre-recorded. Within that training video, we walked them through the different behaviors they were seeing, why that qualified an animal for a certain number on the ethogram, and provided some examples for them to get them associated with using the ethogram. And then the third treatment group not only saw that same exact training video, but they were also given some separate exercises to give them experience. So just example videos that they were able to practice with that showed them, why they scored the correct answer or why they got it incorrect. Following the treatment or not, if the animals were in the control, they then went through and watched videos again and assigned, again, chute scores based on the ethogram. What we found, the results of the experiment, were that regardless of cattle handling experience, age, or sex, exposure to the training video itself did increase the accuracy of the assessment. So, let's say someone received, an 80 on the test, the first time they went through, exposure to that training video increased their accuracy by over 10%. So we did see quite a great result of that training video and that additional information.
While chute scoring has its benefits, there can be some potential drawbacks. One such drawback is just how complicated it can be at times to accurately assess animal temperament. It can take a great deal of training and practice to make sure we remain consistent in our scoring.
Today, cattlemen just use, this animal has acceptable temperament, this animal has unacceptable temperament. And while that works, it's been my experience that acceptable temperament varies based on what's happened earlier that day. Whether your fuse is short or long will determine whether an animal is considered, docile or not. And so using an ethogram with consistent descriptions of, whatever the threshold of acceptance may be for you as a producer, it just allows something to be a little bit more consistent.
Whether you're old or young, a novice or seasoned cattle producer, this study has proven that a little training can go a long way regardless of your experience or lack thereof. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Thanks, Bill. Jamie tells us while moderately docile cattle may be preferable, producers want to be sure they don't get cattle docile enough that are difficult to work through handling facilities. If you'd like to learn more about assessing chute score in cattle, or if you'd like to view a training video, we've included additional links on the Market Journal website. Next up, according to the 2020 Nebraska Rural Poll, 40% of Nebraskans say their economic livelihood is dependent on the success of production agriculture. That's just a glimpse into this year's poll, an annual survey that measures the factors contributing to rural life and policy issues. Market Journal's Maddie McIntosh spoke to one of the researchers involved in collecting data for the poll to find out more.
The Nebraska Rural Poll has been sent out every year since 1995, and 2020 is no different. Celebrating its 25th anniversary amongst a worldwide pandemic has made the poll's job more important than ever.
It aims to kind of get the heartbeat of what it's like to live in rural Nebraska. So we think about rural Nebraska and we think about farming and ranching, but there are people that live in rural Nebraska and have jobs outside of agriculture and connected to agriculture and live in very, very small towns and villages and larger cities and towns that are 5,000 to 10,000 people. And to try to understand all of the different facets of life for those folks that aren't living in the Omaha and Lincoln metro areas. The survey is sent out in a very scientific manner, and we had the typical response. So it was set at random to 6,000 people, and it was just shy of 2,000 responses came back then in April, May, and June.
The poll found that 75% of rural Nebraskans know their community's well-being relies on agriculture, even if they're not directly involved.
They understand the macroeconomic concepts of how not only is ag important for them individually, but for the state and how everything is interconnected. That was something that, for me individually, was a really neat surprise to see how they understood that, hey, when cattle prices and beef prices and corn prices are good and agriculture is thriving, that's good for them as well. Even if they're 3 arms lengths away from ag, they know that ag is good for them, it's good for the community. So that was interesting. It was also neat to see how many Nebraskans are within 1 or 2 generations from the farm or the ranch. So it's inescapable, especially if you live in rural Nebraska.
The poll also sought out what rural Nebraskans thought of the livestock-friendly county designations. The responses showed that not everyone is on the same page.
This isn't necessarily so negative, but one of the things that we talked about was the livestock-friendly designation. And the result was, well, we don't really know if it's good or bad. We really don't know what it means. And probably for good reason. If you were not familiar with the designation, you might not know exactly what that means. Your imagination can go to different places about what livestock-friendly designation means.
On the other hand, there was a majority of positive responses when it came to questions about rural communities.
The pretty overwhelming majority of people are happy with the services that their town provides. There were some negative responses about roads, but they're happy with the fire department, they're happy with the police department, they're happy with the library, they're happy with the churches in their community. People in Nebraska have this strong attachment to their community. And they have a strong attachment for kind of superficial reasons like, hey, everyone's really friendly, but then it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. I feel like I'm part of the community. They feel like even if they were given a really good job opportunity, the majority of them would have a very difficult time leaving the community. So they're emotionally a part of their communities. They even feel like their voices are heard. And you would think, okay, there's going to be maybe a difference between 500 and 5,000 sized communities, and not really. I mean, the folks in the really small communities, as you would probably guess, feel like their voice is heard, but the people in the kind of mid-sized communities feel that way too.
Overall, Tim says the poll shows that rural Nebraska is heading in the right direction.
The trend in the rural poll is positive. If you just had to take the temperature or the pulse of what's going on in rural Nebraska, it's good, and it's moving in the right direction.
Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Maddie McIntosh.
Thanks, Maddie. To read the complete results of the 2020 Nebraska Rural Poll or reports from previous years, visit ruralpoll.unl.edu. Time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. Al felt a lot different after that cold front earlier this week. What's in the forecast for the week ahead?
Well, Troy, we had an interesting beginning of the week with that big long wave trough we talked about last week, and it actually came out a little bit slower than was originally forecasted. and the cold air got in here a little bit earlier than forecasted. The main energy kind of lagged behind, and so we had in the upper atmosphere a southwest to northeast flow. So that kept that warm air above the surface. Unfortunately, that formed a freezing rain and ice storm band basically across portions of central up to northeastern Nebraska, and some pretty significant damage. I think the saving grace in all of this, if you want to call it a saving grace, was that we had extraordinary winds the few days prior to the event, and a lot of leaves were ripped off of the trees. Otherwise, we probably would have seen more significant damage if we'd have kept more foliage on our trees. We ended up seeing snowfall basically in the 2 to 4 inch range, a lot of locations north of Interstate 80, a little bit tailing off as you got into south central and southwest Nebraska, but the big winners in terms of snowfall are right along the Nebraska, South Dakota, Iowa border intersect. Anywhere from 8 to 9 inches were reported unofficially. So now that we've had that big storm go through us, we're looking at really a fairly benign pattern for this next week. Biggest issue will be when we have a front come through and see our temperatures dropping, but otherwise we're not looking for any major precipitation. So if we go to the upper air models for this morning, what we will notice is we have one trough that is moving through the region right now, the cold air to our north, the main energy south of the state, and that should induce some precipitation basically across Kansas and points off to the east as the day progresses. That's going to usher in cooler air as the afternoon progresses from west to east. See this little precipitation band? Outside chance that some of this might interact in southeast Nebraska. Then by tomorrow, that piece of energy rips off to the east rather rapidly. We get a slight ridging building in, but there is a little cold air that is going to be coming down behind this front to reinforce the cool air, particularly over northeast Nebraska, as we see more of the major precipitation over the Great Lakes region. So we're going to be looking at temperatures that are going to be a little bit below seasonal in the 40s, 50s out the southwest. Then we start to see this ridge building in for Monday. So our temperatures are going to warm dramatically across western Nebraska. They're going to stay cool in eastern Nebraska. We're probably looking at 50s to 55 across the southwest, more in the upper 30s, low 40s across the northeast. Main precipitation means out to our west. Then we really start to see the ridge building up toward the north on Tuesday. Very warm conditions across western Nebraska, widespread 50s and probably a few 60s and across the southwest. In eastern Nebraska, we're going to be bumping up into the mid 40s to the 50s. Overall, very dry precipitation forecast. Then the center of that ridge starts to move in right across the center part of the country on Wednesday. Very warm conditions statewide. We'll be looking at 50s in the northeast, 60s across the south, and in the southwest, probably pushing the 70-degree mark. No precipitation in sight. You can see that we're starting to get some storm activity across the northwest. That's going to help to push the ridge a little bit farther toward the east on Thursday, get a southwest flow aloft, going to bring in drier air, so our fire danger may actually increase across western Nebraska. Surface low forms in southeastern South Dakota, no moisture to speak of, so we're not expecting anything more than a few clouds. On Friday, we start to see a trough kind of moving out of that Pacific Northwest into the Central Plains. This might be just a little bit fast. I think this is going to probably come a little bit later into the weekend, probably Saturday into Sunday. And then we see some precipitation in the Central Rockies, but if this moves at the current pace as forecasted, then we're not going to be looking at a lot of precipitation. If this slows down, we can get a little bit more moisture up into our region. We could be looking for potential for a little bit more precipitation across the Central Plains, particularly as we get into Saturday night into Sunday. Now, as we look at the 8 to 14-day forecast, from next Thursday to the following Tuesday, you can see well above normal temperatures in place. So even with that front coming through, we're expected to rebound in terms of temperatures. In terms of precipitation, the above normal precipitation shown here is simply that wave coming through our region. This weekend, it looks like the vast majority of the precipitation will fall to the east of us. More importantly, as we look to the Thanksgiving Day week, just a preview right now, the GFS model at least is hinting at dry conditions from essentially Monday through Friday with a warm or well above normal temperatures. We may be looking at a repeat back into the 60s, possibly 70s. Then look for that cold air in the Pacific Northwest to start making it into our region as we enter the first part of December.
Thanks, Al. Finally today, as we continue to track the spread of COVID-19, large in-person events remain on hold. And throughout the pandemic, Nebraska Extension has offered several virtual events to continue educational efforts across the state. The latest event focuses on the challenges farmers and ranchers face in finding and retaining high-caliber employees. The Leading Farm and Ranch Employees virtual seminar series begins next month via Zoom. The seminar will seek to help ag professionals learn the best practices to incentivize and empower employees. Bob Milligan, Senior Consultant with Dairy Strategies LLC and Professor Emeritus with Cornell, will lead the event and cover a wide range of topics.
So the seminar series is designed to benefit farm and ranch ag employers who really want to develop their skills to improve their leadership in terms of working with the employees that are part of their operation. So there'll be topics such as how do you identify what your employee needs are? How do you develop recruitment for employees, things like a job description? How do you go out and identify a target in terms of where you want to find an employee? We'll also talk about things like how do you work with an employee in terms of evaluation. When you have a job description, how do you go over with them how they're progressing? And then also we'll talk about training. The first 2 weeks that employees part of the operation are really critical and really can set the foundation for how successful they'll be long term in terms of will they stay, will they be able to integrate and understand the values of the operation. And so part of that's a self-assessment survey to kind of understand what your skills are, maybe what your natural bents are in terms of your leadership style as it relates to how you develop and work with employees.
Since the seminar will be held via Zoom, participants will need to use a computer or tablet with a camera and microphone. The event will be offered December 8th, 11th, 15th, and 18th from 12:30 p.m. to 2 p.m. Central Time. The cost is $50 per person and participation is limited to 50 people. The deadline to register is December 1st, and if you have any questions, you can contact Aaron Berger directly. His email is aberger2@unl.edu, and his phone number is 308-235-3122. We also have a link to register on the Market Journal website. That's going to do it for this week's show. Remember, if you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app or follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. And don't forget, you can get the latest updates on the coronavirus outbreak at covid19.unl.edu. Hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.